Ginger Meadows. Ginger Faye Meadows was a 24-year-old American model from Colorado who had watched the movie Crocodile Dundee in 1986 and fell in love with the idea of visiting Australia. The film inspired her to take a trip to see the country's wild northern regions for herself. In March 1987, after attending the America's Cup yacht races in Perth, Ginger hitched a ride north on the Lady G, a luxury yacht captained by Bruce Fitzpatrick. She was traveling with the crew and other passengers up Australia's northwestern coast, heading toward Darwin. On the morning of March 29, 1987, the yacht anchored near the mouth of the Prince Regent River. Captain Fitzpatrick decided to take Ginger and three others on a speedboat trip to King's Cascades, a stunning terraced waterfall that overlooks a bay. The Cascades sit 130 feet above a cove and stretch as wide as a football field, with rainbow mist rising from the falls. The group arrived at the Cascades and began exploring. Ginger and another woman from the yacht, Jane Burchett, waded into the tidal pool at the base of the falls. They were standing in waist-deep water with their backs against a rock wall, enjoying the spectacular scenery. Captain Fitzpatrick, who was standing on a slope above the falls, suddenly saw a large crocodile approaching the women through the water. He shouted a warning. Jane threw her shoe at the crocodile and it disappeared beneath the surface. For a moment, it seemed the danger had passed. Then Ginger made a fatal decision. She tried to swim to safety, thinking she could outswim the crocodile and reach the shore before it caught her. The crocodile resurfaced and grabbed Ginger in its massive jaws. It pulled her under the water, then came back to the surface with her still in its mouth before dragging her down again. Jane Burchett and the others could only watch in horror as Ginger disappeared into the dark water. Search teams found Ginger's remains the next day, March 30th, which would have been her 25th birthday. During the recovery operation, another crocodile attacked the rescue boat, lunging 4 feet out of the water and snapping at the body bag containing her remains. The attack prompted calls for warning signs and stricter rules about swimming in crocodile-infested waters, though authorities noted that the area was so remote and subject to 35-foot tides that posting signs would be nearly impossible. Isabel Von Jordan. She was 23 years old and on vacation in Australia in October 2002. She and her sister Valerie had just left Bali 1 hour before a terrorist bomb destroyed the Sari Club, killing 202 people. They came to Australia to escape the horror of what had almost happened to them, choosing to spend time in the safer-seeming Australian outback. The sisters joined a 4-day tour of Kakadu National Park led by Glenn Robles, an experienced guide who had been working in the area for 13 years. On the final night of the trip, the group was camping near Sandy Creek, Billabong, about 35 kilometers south of Jabiru. It was a beautiful evening with a full moon overhead. Some of the tourists wanted to go swimming. There were crocodile warning signs posted around the Billabong, at least 3 of them. But Robles assured the group the water was safe, saying only harmless freshwater crocodiles might be present, not the dangerous saltwater crocodiles. What Robles knew but didn't tell them was that Sandy Creek was home to at least 8 large saltwater crocodiles. Local knowledge confirmed this. He had taken groups there before to wash, but had never let anyone swim. Around 11 p.m., several tourists entered the water, including Isabel and Valerie. They waded out about 10 yards from shore, staying within sight of each other. Then James Rothwell, a British tourist in the group, felt something bang against his leg. Seconds later, he heard a girl scream. A 15-foot, 1,100-pound saltwater crocodile had grabbed Isabel. The attack happened so fast that nobody could react. She was pulled under the water and disappeared. Park rangers began searching at dawn. By 6:30 a.m., they found Isabel's body still in the crocodile's jaws. The rangers shot and killed the crocodile to recover Isabel's body. During their search, they found 8 other large saltwater crocodiles in that same billabong where Robles had told tourists it was safe to swim. Glenn Robles pleaded guilty to making a dangerous omission that caused Isabel's death. He received a 3-year suspended prison sentence. The coroner called his decision to allow the group to swim inexplicable, indefensible, and grossly negligent. Cindy Waldron. On May 29, 2016, Cindy Waldron and her childhood friend Leanne Mitchell were celebrating. Leanne had just beaten breast cancer and completed her treatment. The 2 women, who had been friends since primary school, decided to take a trip to the Daintree rainforest in far north Queensland, Australia. They drove to Thornton Beach, a remote and beautiful spot near Cape Tribulation. It was around 10 p.m. when they decided to go for a late-night walk along the beach. The area was known for crocodiles. There were warning signs everywhere, and tour operators ran crocodile spotting tours on the creek right next to the beach. Despite the warnings, the 2 women waded into the water. They were holding hands as they walked in the shallows, waist deep in the water. Leanne's back was to the water and Cindy's back was to the beach. Then it happened. A massive crocodile grabbed Cindy from behind. She screamed, "A croc's got me!" And Leanne immediately tried to save her. She grabbed onto Cindy's arm and pulled with everything she had. But the crocodile was too strong. Within seconds, Cindy was gone, pulled under the dark water and dragged away. Leanne was left standing in the shallows, traumatized and covered in minor scratches from the struggle. Search teams worked for days trying to find Cindy's body. 5 days later, they trapped a crocodile near the attack site and euthanized it. Inside were Cindy's remains. Jeremy Doble. The Doble family lived in a treehouse-style home on the banks of the Daintree River in northeastern Australia. Steve and Sharon Doble ran the Daintree Rainforest River Train, an ecotourism business that took visitors on boat cruises to spot crocodiles in their natural habitat. They knew crocodiles well and understood the dangers of living so close to the river. Their two sons, Jeremy, age 5, and Ryan, age 7, had grown up around crocodiles. They were careful children who had been taught to respect the dangerous reptiles that lived in the waters near their home. On the morning of February 8, 2009, the Daintree River had flooded into the Doble's backyard due to an especially high tide. Jeremy and Ryan were playing behind their house with their new boxer puppy named Champ. The boys were taking turns pulling each other around on a boogie board through the shallow floodwaters, and Champ was splashing nearby. Then Jeremy noticed something that made his heart stop. A large crocodile was silently moving through the water, heading straight for Champ. The 14-foot saltwater crocodile was closing in on the puppy, and Jeremy knew what would happen if it reached him. Without hesitation, Jeremy positioned himself between his puppy and the crocodile. He tried to scare the massive predator away, waving his arms and making noise. But the crocodile didn't retreat. Instead, it seized Jeremy in its powerful jaws. Ryan watched in horror and screamed for help. Their father, Steve Doble, came running from the house. By the time he reached the water, everything had gone silent. Steve searched frantically through the water and mud, but found nothing. He spent over 20 hours a day for nearly 2 weeks searching every river and creek with authorities and friends desperate to find his son. 10 days later, search teams trapped a 14-foot male saltwater crocodile in the flooded Daintree River near where Jeremy had vanished. Using a non-lethal surgical procedure, veterinarians examined the crocodile's stomach contents. Inside, they found Jeremy's remains. Steve and Sharon Doble, despite their grief, asked authorities not to kill the crocodile. As people who worked with crocodiles professionally, they understood that the animal was simply being a crocodile, doing what crocodiles do. The crocodile, which they called Goldie, was sent to live at a crocodile farm. Bryony Goodsell. On the afternoon of March 15th, 2009, 11-year-old Bryony went swimming with her younger sister and 2 other children at Black Jungle Swamp near Lamball's Lagoon, just outside Humpty Doo. This was a rural area southeast of Darwin, Australia, and the children had gone there to cool off on a hot day. The swimming spot was a place where local families had swum for years, but what they didn't know was that a large saltwater crocodile, approximately 10 feet long, had moved into the area during recent heavy rains and high water levels. The children were playing and swimming together when suddenly Bryony screamed for help. Her friends looked over and saw her starting to go under the water. Then they saw the head and tail of a crocodile splash the surface right where Bryony had been moments before. The other children ran for help, terrified by what they had witnessed. Adults came running, but by the time they reached the water, Bryony was gone. There was no sign of her anywhere. Search teams worked through the night looking for Bryony. The next day, Monday, they found her remains in the water about 500 yards from where she had disappeared. DNA testing confirmed the body was Bryony's. Authorities called off the search for the crocodile, believing it had moved into the surrounding crocodile-infested floodplains where catching it would be nearly impossible. A coroner later determined that a saltwater crocodile about 10 feet long had traveled into the creek from the Adelaide River floodplain during the period of heavy rain. Hendrik Coetzee. Hendrik Coetzee was a South African outdoorsman and author who had gained fame in 2004 for leading a source-to-sea expedition down the entire length of the Nile River. He was known for testing himself against nature's most extreme challenges, and his blog, The Great White Explorer, documented his adventures with poetic passion. In December 2010, Coetzee was leading 2 American kayakers, Ben Stooksbury and Chris Corbulich, on an expedition through Congo's Lukuga River. This was uncharted territory, a first-of-its-kind kayaking expedition documenting unexplored whitewater in one of Africa's most dangerous regions. Coetzee knew the risks. He had warned his companions about the 3-ton hippos that could bite them in half and the crocodiles that might fancy them for lunch. "Stay off the banks because the crocs are having a bake," he told them. "Basically, stay close behind me and follow my lead. Any questions?" The stretch of river they were navigating was notorious for its deadly wildlife, high concentrations of both crocodiles and hippopotamus. On the morning of December 7th, 2010, the three men were kayaking down the river when a crocodile struck from below the surface. The attack happened so fast that Stooksbury and Corbulich could barely process what they were seeing. One moment, Coetzee was there, paddling ahead of them. The next moment, a massive crocodile had grabbed him and was pulling him out of his kayak. The two Americans watched in horror as their guide was dragged into the water. There was nothing they could do. The crocodile disappeared beneath the surface with Coetzee, and he never resurfaced. The Americans paddled to safety and were eventually evacuated to a nearby town by the International Rescue Committee. Coetzee's body was never recovered. The river had taken him completely. Did you enjoy this breakdown? Then hit the subscribe button for more.
Bethany Stevens. Bethany Stevens was just 22 years old in December 2017 when she took her two pit bulls for a walk in the woods near her home in rural Virginia. These weren't new dogs or rescue animals with unknown histories. They were her pets, dogs she had raised and cared for. She loved them, and as far as anyone knew, they loved her back. She went into those woods with her dogs like she had done many times before, but this time, she never came back. Her father went looking for her when she didn't return home. What he found was something no parent should ever have to see. His daughter's body was lying on the ground, and her two dogs were standing over her guarding her remains. But they weren't protecting her from danger. They had been the danger. When investigators arrived, they found a horrific scene. Bethany's ribcage was visible through her torn clothing and flesh. The dogs had mauled her to death and then begun eating her body. The sheriff who responded to the scene had to tell the public something that seemed impossible to believe. These family pets had killed and partially consumed their owner. Some people refused to believe it at first. How could beloved pets do something so horrific? But the forensic evidence told the clear story. Bethany had defensive wounds on her body, showing she had tried to fight off the attack. The dogs had blood covering their jaws and mouths. There was no other explanation. The dog she trusted had turned on her in the woods and killed her. Nobody knows exactly what triggered the attack. Maybe something in the woods set them off. Maybe their prey drive kicked in. Maybe they got into a fight with each other and Bethany got caught in the middle. Whatever started it, two dogs she had cared for ended her life in one of the most brutal ways imaginable. Kelly Ann Walls. Kelly Ann Walls was 37 years old and living in Pennsylvania in October 2009. She owned a black bear that weighed 350 pounds. People keep all sorts of exotic pets, and Kelly had kept this bear for years. She thought she understood it. She thought she could handle it safely. On that October day, Kelly went into the bear's cage to clean it. This was routine, something she had done many times before. She tried to distract the bear with food while she worked, a strategy that had worked in the past. But this time, something went wrong. The bear attacked her inside the cage. And once a 350-pound bear decides to attack, there's almost nothing a human can do to stop it. The attack was brutal and quick. The worst part was that Kelly's children were there. They watched their mother being mauled to death by an animal she had trusted. They were helpless to do anything. A neighbor who heard the screams came running and shot the bear to end the attack, but by then it was too late. Kelly was already dead. Authorities who investigated the incident made a simple but important point. Despite being kept as a pet, the bear was still a wild animal. Kelly had treated it like a pet, but the bear never stopped being what it was, a dangerous predator. Charla Nash. In February 2009, Charla Nash went to visit her friend Sandra Harold in Stamford, Connecticut. Sandra owned a chimpanzee named Travis who weighed 200 pounds. Travis wasn't just any pet. He had been raised like a human child for 14 years. He wore clothes, used the bathroom, drank from a glass, and had appeared in TV commercials. He seemed as tame as any animal could be. Charla had been to Sandra's house many times before. Travis knew her. There was no reason to think anything would go wrong on this particular day. Sandra just needed help getting Travis back into the house, and Charla came over to assist. But when Charla arrived, something in Travis changed. Without any warning, the chimp attacked her with savage violence. He went after her face and hands with focused brutality. Sandra tried desperately to stop him. She hit him with a shovel, stabbed him with a knife. Nothing worked. She finally called 911, begging for help. When police arrived, Travis attacked their car. An officer shot him, and Travis retreated into the house where he died. But the damage to Charla was already done. The attack had been so severe that Charla lost her nose, lips, eyelids, and both hands. Her face was essentially gone. She survived, but her life as she knew it was over. She would eventually need a face transplant and a hand transplant, procedures that were still experimental at the time. The 911 call from that day is one of the most disturbing recordings you can hear. Sandra is screaming, begging for help, describing what's happening to her friend. The operator can barely understand what's being said because the situation is so unbelievable. Charlotte Nash survived, but she was left blind and severely disfigured. She needed years of surgeries and would never look the same or live independently again. Michal Prasek. He was 34 years old and living in the Czech Republic in March 2019. He kept 2 adult lions, a male and a female, in his backyard. He was keeping them illegally without permits, but he'd had them for years and felt confident he could manage them safely. His neighbors were terrified. They knew those lions were there, and they feared that eventually something terrible would happen. But Michal loved his lions and believed he had a special bond with them. One morning, Michal's father was checking the security cameras at his son's property. What he saw on the screen made his blood run cold. His son was lying motionless inside the lion enclosure, and the 9-year-old male lion was standing near the body. The lion had mauled Michal to death. When police arrived, they couldn't get close to the body because both lions were still in the enclosure, treating it as their territory. Officers had to shoot and kill both the male and the female lion before they could safely recover Michal's remains. Isabelle Denoir. Isabelle Denoir was 38 years old in May 2005 when she had an epileptic episode and passed out in her home in France. She owned a Labrador Retriever mix, a breed that most people consider gentle and family-friendly. This was her pet, an animal she trusted completely. When Isabelle woke up from her seizure, she knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. She touched her face and felt nothing where her nose should have been. Her lips were gone. Parts of her chin were missing. She stumbled to a mirror and saw something from a nightmare. Half of her face was simply gone. Her dog had done this while she was unconscious. The Labrador had chewed off her nose, lips, and parts of her chin. Essentially, the dog had eaten half of her face while she lay helpless on the floor. The injuries were so catastrophic that normal reconstructive surgery couldn't fix them. Surgeons in France made the decision to attempt something that had never been done before, the world's first partial face transplant. They essentially gave Isabelle a new face using tissue from a donor. Later, Isabelle tried to understand what had happened. She believed that maybe the dog had been trying to wake her up from the seizure and panicked when she wouldn't respond. Maybe the dog thought she was dead and its scavenging instincts took over. Nobody knows for sure what made a family Labrador do something so horrific. Jade Lomas Anderson. He was just 14 years old in March 2013 when she went to visit a friend's house in Greater Manchester, England. The friend's family owned 4 large dogs, 2 bull mastiffs, and 2 Staffordshire bull terriers. These were family pets that lived in the house. Jade had probably been around them before without any problems. At some point, Jade was left alone with the 4 dogs. Something triggered them. Maybe they saw her as an intruder. Maybe one dog started acting aggressively and the others joined in. Whatever the reason, all 4 dogs attacked her at once. The attack was prolonged and brutal. The dogs chased Jade throughout the house, biting her repeatedly. She had no way to escape and no way to fight off 4 powerful dogs that had decided she was a threat or prey. When police arrived at the scene, they found Jade dead from catastrophic bite injuries. The evidence showed this hadn't been a quick attack. It had gone on for some time, with the dogs pursuing her through multiple rooms. Armed officers had to shoot and kill all 4 dogs on site before they could safely secure the area. Jade's death shocked the nation. This wasn't an attack by strange dogs on the street. This happened in a private home with pets that belonged to people the family knew. A teenage girl went to visit a friend and never came home because the friend's family dogs turned into killers. Marvin Jesus. He was 75 years old and living in Florida in April 2019. He kept an exotic pet that most people have never even heard of, a cassowary. This is a large flightless bird from Australia and New Guinea that's often called the world's most dangerous bird. Cassowaries stand about 6 feet tall, weigh around 100 pounds, and have dagger-like claws that are 4 inches long. They use these claws to defend themselves by kicking with incredible force. In the wild, they're normally reclusive and avoid humans, but when threatened or cornered, they can be deadly. On that April day, Marvin was tending to his cassowary on his property when he tripped and fell. That moment of vulnerability was all it took. The cassowary saw him on the ground and attacked, using its powerful legs to kick him with those razor-sharp claws. The claws sliced through Marvin's flesh, inflicting massive trauma. He was rushed to the hospital, but the injuries were too severe. He died from the wounds the bird had caused. The cockfighting tragedy? In February 2021, in the Indian state of Telangana, a man in his 40s was participating in an illegal cockfight. Cockfighting involves attaching blades to roosters' legs and having them fight each other while people bet on the outcome. It's illegal in India, but underground cockfighting rings still operate. This man was preparing his fighting rooster for a match. He was attaching a 3-inch knife blade to the rooster's leg when the bird started struggling to escape. In the chaos, the rooster managed to slash the man's groin with the blade that was being attached to its leg. The blade cut deep into an artery. Blood poured from the wound. The man's friends rushed him to the hospital, but he bled to death on the way there. He had been killed by his own rooster, using the weapon he himself had been attaching to the bird. Police seized the blood-stained rooster as evidence and launched a manhunt for the other people involved in the illegal cockfighting operation. If you enjoyed this, then check out the most brutal shark attacks ever here.